and how those institutions help to shape our behavior. All right. Where it is here. So education is a very important role in the socialization process, right? The family is important. The family is the primary way in which we socialize, but education is very, very important. Uh, in the Caribbean, we have quite a lot of formal schooling, but that was not always the case in the Caribbean. Now, in your own school or in your own formal schooling, how education uh, played an important role in your socialization? Question out. How education played an important role? Go ahead for me, Jackson.
Well, sir, when you go to school, you learn certain norms and values which make you functional in the society, as well as you learn to interact with other groups of people from different backgrounds and ethnicities, and you get to learn a lot of things from them, and that also helps you to be functional within the society.
That is true. Very well. Thank you very much, Fletcher.
Sorry, just to add to what she said, you learn about different cultures and different religions, so that helps you to appreciate other people and it makes you less likely to discriminate.
Less likely. You don't find there's a lot of discrimination in Jamaican schools. I'll ask you the question how it helps you. And I know for sure that you said it helps you, but you don't find that there's discrimination in school. We don't tend to appreciate each other differences in schools.
Yes, sir, I agree that there's just discrimination and there's a lot of segregation as well. So people from similar backgrounds, they tend to, sit together at lunch and stuff like that.
All right, that is true to some yes, to some extent. Well, my experience. Anyone else? Education. Very popular question on the exam. They ask you about colonial education. Go ahead for me, Shirley.
I think that education, because it's not necessarily offered to a certain extent to everyone in the same way, education also allows it to be a part of a certain class of people. So it also plays a part, as you said, in the segregation and discrimination. So it's positive and negative in some sense, because if you go to university, you will be seen differently from somebody who didn't, and etc.
That is true. Very, very true. All right. So when we look at the Caribbean, yes, O'Connor.
So it teaches you how to operate under a meritocratic system.
All right. Break that down for me.
Oh, so essentially, based on how your work ethic, how hard you work, you are rewarded. So for schools, like if, say for instance, Andrews, you'll be on,
Mhm.
you get certain awards based on number of passes, number of A's that you gain in examinations.
That's true. You don't find that there's some favoritism in schools.
Sometimes, yes, sir.
I
If
remember
you're
when I was.
sometimes if you're well liked, if a
Mhm.
specific teacher likes you, they'll give you a mark even though you didn't work for it. So I guess that's a flaw of the system.
Yes, it happens. Mm-hmm. And also, um, and also in the system, in the education system, no, I can't just speak for one example that I know about that. When I was attending JC, they had the position for head boy and deputies. You have head boy and then you have a deputy head boy, I think so. And then you have senior prefect. And they selected the head boy based on address, the location, where he lived, not based on the fact that so all the persons who were selected because it was a selection during my year group, they were selected based on where they lived. They are from very affluent families. Then they were selected. If you're not from affluent family and you're a hard worker, people don't pay you any mind. And so we have all of that going on in the system. And then the Melissa Blair mentioned about people, some students segregating based on their different backgrounds in class. You'll tend to find the Indians together, the Chinese staying by themselves, persons who look near white staying by themselves, and the blacks, you have some very affluent blacks, they would have mixed with the whites, some very affluent blacks, well, some blacks also segregate based on their location, where they live. So if everybody live in Spanish Town, you find all of those persons to be friends. If you live in Portmore, those persons are friends. You live Harbour View, you are friends, and you tend to be friends with those persons. Is that the situation in the school system?
Oftentimes, yes, sir.
Some part.
Often, yes. So oftentimes that is what it is like. There is a lot of segregation in the schools. But education plays a very important role in how we socialize, how we treat others. People are coming from different backgrounds with different norms and different values. People are coming from different backgrounds with different uh, ambitions, right? And so, because of that, the school is very diverse, very, very diverse. So, we're going to look now at the development of education in the Caribbean. In the pre-colonial period, this is the period before the Europeans came, the indigenous people tends to had a very informal education system where the females were taught like domestic shows, anything to do with domestic duties. Females were like, for example, painting, some craft, while the males were taught to hunt, fish, fighting, building, right? Females were mostly the ones who were involved in the agriculture. And so here, what we have here in the pre-colonial period was a very informal system. Then when the whites came, they developed formal schools in the Caribbean. And the schools that were established, the schools were established uh, for the whites, mostly poor or rich whites. And so the schools, in fact, the very wealthy planters sent their children to school in Europe, while the poor workers, the poor whites, these schools were developed for the poor whites. But in fact, after a time, these schools became elite schools in the Caribbean. One of the first schools to be established in the Caribbean was Combermere in Barbados in 1682. Then you have Harrison College, Lodge College, Wolmer's, Titchfield. Wolmer's is the first one in Jamaica in 1729. It is the oldest school in Jamaica. Titchfield, Manning's, Jamaica College, right? These are some of the schools that were established to educate whites. They were not established to educate blacks, but they were established to educate whites. I'm looking for the year when Manning's was established because I know it's one of the earliest schools. Yes, so the Manning School, which is in Westmoreland, was established in 1738. It is the second oldest school in Jamaica. (1738). These schools were trust schools, trust, meaning that they were willed. Persons, wealthy planters died, and they left money to establish these schools to educate whites. In fact, laws were passed that only blacks, laws were passed that blacks were not allowed to attend these schools. So in Jamaica, for sure, around the early 1800s, the government of Jamaica passed a law that Africans could not attend Jamaica College. And it was the same for Manning, the same for Titchfield, the same for Wolmer's, the same for Combermere in Barbados, the same for Harrison's College, Lodge College. Whites, these schools were established to educate whites. In fact, if some of the founders of these schools, if they should wake them up out of the grave, well, have some resurrective power and wake them up. And they should see what their schools have become. They would be very, very shocked and surprised to see black principals, black teachers, black students at these schools. In fact, when blacks started to attend Jamaica College, the head boy at the school in the 1960s said, Jamaica College has not gone to the dogs. The dogs have come to Jamaica College. First day, the black boys walked into the school. They went to assembly, the head boy gave his speech. The dogs have come to Jamaica College in reference to black boys. And during the slavery period, enslaved were not permitted into formal schooling. They could not go to school. Laws were passed to say that enslaved were not, you could not teach the enslaved to read. So they couldn't teach them to read. In fact, Hilary Beckles, a historian, male historian, he said that slaves who taught themselves to read had to keep their accomplishment a secret. Because if they knew that you could read as an enslaved person, you could be killed or face some form of severe punishment. Errol Miller, someone who is very popular in the education system, the 1000, the JC, I have 1795 here. The school, the, wait name again? Charles Drax would have died around the 1780s, and the money was left to establish the school in 1789. But the school didn't actually start until 1795.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
So the first day they met together was in 1795. It's not like the other schools that these schools were actually started. The first day you meet where class happened was that, because you see the person who he left the will to manage his will in 1789, they took, well, they stole a lot of the money for the establishment of the school. So 1795 was when it started. When I was going to school, I said 1789, but a book that was recently published, said, it said 1795. Now look at this here. This is their latest book at the school. History of their school. A sugarcane planter's legacy. You don't find something wrong with the title of the book? Anybody, as Black children or children of descendants of enslaved, you don't find something wrong with the title of the book? Jamaica College's Sugarcane Planters Legacy. Book was published last year.
Yes, sir, it's problematic
It
because
doesn't sit right with me.
yeah, wasn't there, died.
Sir, look from when slavery over and them still talking about sugarcane planter. Like really? No.
Look how long slavery. Yeah, correct. And I agree with you. Look how long slavery come to an end from 1838. And then you now are talking about a sugarcane planter's legacy, right? And it basically reinforces some of the issues, the historical issues that Blacks would have gone through. Recently published, a book just come out, I think it was last year. And this is their school book that they are going to give to the boys there to study their school history in grade 7. A
Sir, they could
sugar.
have come up with a better name.
So basically what they are saying here is that blacks 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 are not supposed to be there. Could be, I'm not sure if that is what they are saying, but the mere fact that you put a title as a sugarcane planter's legacy, what is the
It's making
legacy?
it.
Go ahead.
I was just saying it's making it sound like the boy with the sugarcane planter. Like it's a privilege. Like they don't really own the school,
Yeah, like the
you know?
praising the plant, no? So
Yeah.
They praising the planter, and it seems and then the legacy of the planter is a legacy of exclusion. It was not inclusive of blacks. And then also at JC, when I went there, they had a white principal. From the school was established from 1795 until now. They have only had about 4 black principals. When I went there was a white principal who was there from England. They couldn't find a principal in Jamaica. They went to England to search for a principal, a white man, to be principal of the school. And maybe that's one of the reasons why so much or so many Jamaicans prefer KC over JC, because Kingston College was established to educate poor black boys. KC was supposed to be the black boys' school in comparison to JC, which was the school of the elites. And so we know for sure that Africans were not permitted to attend schools. Errol Miller said that while some may have justified the lack of provision for slaves by denying their human status, the fear was that education would be subversive to both slavery and the plantation. And so they didn't want blacks to be educated. And that's one of the reasons why in the Caribbean today, especially in Jamaica, our literacy rate is so low among our adult population. Because education, even after slavery ended, was limited to only a certain group of people. 10 years before slavery ended, education was provided to the enslaved people through the churches. And so the government gave money to the churches to educate the enslaved people. And which day they're going to use to educate the enslaved people? Which day the church going to use? Or what program of the church?
Sunday school?
Sunday schools. Yes. So a lot of people in the Caribbean learn to read, learn to write, learn to count because of Sunday schools. Right now, a lot of people don't want to go Sunday school, correct? Who go to church here? You go to Sunday school?
Yes, sir.
no, sir.
Yes, sir. Well, they don't have it during Corona time, but I would have.
But you usually go to Sunday school. But a lot of people try not to go to Sunday school. They go to church around little later because they want to miss Sunday school. And if the Sunday school is after church, as church finish, you go home. But Sunday school was,
I prefer the Sunday school.
you prefer the Sunday school. And then you have some people who go to Sabbath school, but during this time, Sabbath school wasn't around. It was Sunday school. So the enslaved people learned to read, they learned to read, write, every little thing at Sunday school. After slavery ended, because the colonial period has 2 periods, you have pre-emancipation and post-emancipation. Pre is before slavery ended, post is after slavery ended. After slavery ended, the government provided a fund to the missionaries to teach the former enslaved people. And out of this fund came the Micro Teachers College in 1836, sorry. And in 1836, the Micro Teachers College was supposed to train teachers to go out and teach people within the Caribbean. Now, if you were going to school immediately after slavery ended, or even maybe most of the 1900s, the subjects that you do in school is British history. If you are from Jamaica, you do Jamaica history, Jamaica geography, British geography, Bible, reading, writing, and arithmetic. That was the subjects that you did in school. So you had a British history class, a Jamaica history class, a British geography class, a Jamaica geography class, Bible, reading, writing, arithmetic. And you learn British history before Jamaican history, and you learn British geography before Jamaican geography. What do you think about this, the syllabus or the subjects that were offered?
Sir?
Go ahead, Fami Jackson.
Sir, it would be very Eurocentric.
Yes, very, very Eurocentric. Palmer?
Sir, I was going to say it sounds like they're trying to kind of brainwash the kids, well, the people in general.
Yes, very much so. And so everything, in fact, one of the reasons why they changed to CXC was that they used to ask students to write about, like in the story, the English exam, they would give the students something about London Bridge. So they have, you know, in exam, they used to give a picture, I don't know if they still do it, and they say write a story based on the picture. And they would show the students some parts of London and say write a story about London Bridge, or they would show the Queen's, what do you call it now? The palace, and say write a story. And most of the students in the Caribbean, they have never been to England. They don't know how London Bridge stay, and you're asking them to write stories about London Bridge. And that's one of the reasons why people advocated for the change to CXC, even though CXC modeled the British exam, so you could give them more Caribbean-based things. Also, in the post-emancipation period, there was another school that emerged, the denominational schools. And these are schools that are state, so the government gives some money and the church. It's a partnership between the church and the government. One such school is your school, St. Andrew High School for girls. You have Kingston College, Holy Childhood, Immaculate. I think Immaculate was one of the first. Calabar. These are church schools. Church schools. So one, in the Caribbean, we had trust schools. The earlier schools, very elite schools, were the trust schools. And then later on, you had the church schools. I think Wilma still use the word trust.
Yes, sir, they do.
They still use it. Okay. And so you have trust schools and you have church schools. Here now, in the colonial period, you had low enrollments of blacks. So even though some of these schools, not even some, Kingston College was supposed to be the school to educate blacks. A lot of colored went there. Same thing with early childhood. If you look at the earlier pictures of St. Andrew, you would see that most of the girls who attended there were very light-skinned girls. Look at all the names of this around the school, all the buildings and the houses, right? I'm going to give another story about JC. There's a house at JC that is called Lady Musgrave House. What is the story about Lady Musgrave? Anybody know the story about Lady Musgrave and Devon House?
I don't know much of it. I just
Devon
heard like,
House.
yeah, I heard a snippet that she didn't want to drive past Devon House because it was kind of owned by, I think, a black person. So she made a road around it so she could drive wherever she wanted to without having to pass it. But I'm not sure.
Watson, very good. Watson, Jada.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say what Destiny was saying.
Yes. So yes. So Lady Musgrave was very racist, and even up to today, the school has a house, Lady Musgrave House, and every day the boys then jump up, Lady Musgrave, Lady Musgrave, celebrating a racist figure. And so you have these schools here, the denominational schools. And in the post-colonial period, the school system was very British. It modeled after the British system. You had low matriculation to university for blacks. Classrooms didn't have enough spaces for blacks in the classrooms. Mostly the whites, the colored, and middle-class blacks attended schools. Poor blacks, who were the majority in the country, they really didn't go to school. Some of them were only allowed to go to school right up until grade 7 or 9. And so that was the condition of our education system in the Caribbean. In fact, it was so bad that university education was only the wealthy. So even if you attend Jamaica College or Wolmer's or Titchfield or Manning's or Kingston College or St. Andrew or Holy Child or Immaculate or Calabar, most of the students who attended these schools never had the opportunity to go to university. Sixth form was the last for them. It's only if the family was very wealthy or you got a scholarship, the Rhodes Scholarship, then you could go to England to study. And so in 1948, after the Moyne Commission, the Moyne Commission said that they should establish a university college. And that's how the University College of the West Indies was established, which is now UWI. Back then it was called UC. And UWI was established for the Caribbean, for all the students in the Caribbean to get an opportunity to attend university or to get a university education. Even today, university enrollment in the Caribbean is very low because it's only 7% of the Caribbean people are university trained. That's very, very low. In fact, Haiti, they had their university way before us in the British Caribbean. Cuba, the University of Havana was established years ago. Puerto Rico had their university. We were the very last to have a university. And so these are some of the issues within the colonial period. Now, once independence came in the Caribbean, the governments of the Caribbean said, listen, it is very, very bad to see the state of our education system and the exclusion of poor. In fact, when Jamaica became independent, over 500,000 Jamaicans could not read nor write. And I'm talking about adults. Adults in Jamaica in the 1960s, high illiteracy, could not read nor write. And that's one of the reasons why when it comes to election, they ask the people to put an X or they put a symbol for them to vote. Couldn't read and couldn't write. Legacy from the period of slavery. The British government basically neglects the Caribbean people. And that's one of the reasons I don't understand why some people today are saying they want us to, we should have remained a British colony. Because during the time of the colonial period, they would have neglected us. Well, it neglected my people because I'm from that group. And so in the 1960s, what happened in the 1960s was that the World Bank gave the Jamaican government some loans, and that's how they expand education. By 1973, we said that we are going to move away from British exams and we implement our own CXC exam. And in the 1970s, you had great expansion in the Jamaican education system under Prime Minister Michael Manley because he implemented free education from primary to university. So Jamaicans went to university, primary, secondary, free, no payment. And that was the time where university was expanded. I think free education stopped in the 1980s. But there are some Caribbean countries now in the independence period that still offer their students free education. Barbados is one, and Trinidad allowed their students, citizens, to go to university free. In the colonial system, under the colonial education and the Caribbean, the system of certification was very British. So any certification that you're getting, O levels, which is like CXC, A levels is like CAPE today, very, very British. It followed a British exam. You learn about British history. The English papers were very British based on a British context. The geography was very British. And it excluded learning about yourself, the Caribbean people, from the syllabus during the colonial period. The language of instruction. So Creole was considered bad talking. You couldn't speak Creole in these colonial schools. Uniform, ties, gowns, robes, badges. Most of you wear a lot of badges. Those are very, very British. You had Girls Guide, Scout, Cadet, very British. Your curriculum was very British based. You study everything about British literature, Shakespeare, British poems. You had to go to devotion, you had to have prayers. You learn about European norms and values. Very, very British. And I want you to pay close attention to this slide because they always ask questions about the colonial education. I'm repeating for those of you who are sleeping. This slide is very important because they always ask questions about colonial education. Now, what are some of the impact of education in the Caribbean? Social mobility. So as a result of being educated, you're able to move up the social ladder. Really don't agree to some extent, yes, to some extent, no. Because right now a lot of people are educated and they're at home. In Jamaica right now is really linked, a family connection, friends connection, really not much about education. If you look in government right now, a lot of people get jobs based on their political connections, not because they are educated. And also, we have a very classist education system in the Caribbean, where you have traditional high schools versus the non-traditional high schools. So all of these schools that were established during slavery or immediately after slavery, Calabar the Immaculate, the Holy Child, St. Andrew, the Kingston College, Jamaica College, Managed Teachfield, those are considered to be traditional high schools. The schools that were established during the independence period, those schools are considered non-traditional high schools. And so the system is very classist. One is heavily government funded, while it's funded by the government, and you tend to have a lot of elites that attend the traditional high school. Then today we have to talk about the accessibility in terms of education in the Caribbean. Right now in the Caribbean, and not only accessibility, but also quality education is a serious problem. We have to look at how the curriculum shape our minds and the role of the church in the education system. Had it not been for the church here in the post-emancipation period, we wouldn't have quite a lot of schools today, and most of these schools today are still run by the church. So the church plays a very important role in the education system. In fact, there are some countries in the Caribbean that 90% of the schools, like Grenada and Belize, that 90% of the schools are church schools. And then also another legacy of the colonial period is male marginalization. Well, I wouldn't say the colonial period. In the post-emancipation, independence. After independence, the males tend to be marginalized. But in the colonial period, you tend that most of the schools or most of the persons who received the scholarship to study abroad were the boys. And so the school system tend to favor quite a lot of the boys instead of the girls. So the boys were supposed to be the medical doctors, the lawyers, the judge, the bankers. And even if you look in today's society, these fields are dominated by the males, while the girls are supposed to do the arts, the literature, the English. They're supposed to be teachers. They're supposed to be secretaries. But in the post-independence, we have seen that has changed. Because once you allow boys and girls to be on the same level, right now, the two top schools in the country, if you look at most of the top schools in the country, it is the girls who are on top. The only school they have that is a co-ed. The only co-ed school that tend to be on top right now is Campion. But the boys' schools are failing miserably. All right? So these are some of the impacts on our education system. Ladies, I'm going to send you the slides and I want you to go through the slide. So when we meet, to any question, any comments?
No, sir.
All right, so when we meet tomorrow, we're going to look at religion, which is another social institution. And I'm begging you, please take up the textbook. You don't have to buy the textbook. Everybody have the textbook on the soft copy. Read the chapter on social institution. Go and read it. Go through the past paper. See how you could answer the questions. All right, ladies, we meet tomorrow when we discuss religion, the role of religion in the Caribbean.
Okay, sir. Bye.
Bye.
Bye
Enjoy the rest
bye.
of the afternoon.
Bye, sir.
Same to you. Bye, sir.
Bye bye.